Introduction to the Acts of Peter from the Apocryphal Acts of Paul, Peter, John, Andrew, and Thomas by Bernhard PICK. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. The Acts of Peter. Photius, in his Bibliotheca, mentions the Acts of Peter together with those of John, Andrew, Thomas, and Paul. What we now have of these Acts is contained in a Latin 7th century manuscript preserved at the library of Vercelli and published by Lipsius. These Acts are known as the Actus Vercellenses. A Coptic fragment was discovered by Schmidt, which also contains Acts of Peter. The deeds narrated in the Coptic take place, according to Schmidt, at Jerusalem, those in the Actus Vercellenses at Rome. Ficker thinks this possible, but not sufficiently established. It is possible that that which is narrated in the Coptic originally formed a part of a work which was called Acts of Peter, and it is also possible that the Coptic narrative originally belonged to another work also called Acts of Peter, differing from the Actus Vercellenses, which were intended to continue and supplement the canonical Acts of the Apostles. Ancient writers seem to have known the Acts of Peter, which were used by certain communities, which the Church regarded as heretical. Whether these Acts were the same as the Actus Vercellenses cannot be said in view of the present state of the latter. As to the author of the Acts of Peter, opinions differ. Zahn and James think that Lucius, the author of the Acts of John, is also the author of the Acts of Peter. Says James, whoever wrote the Acts of John wrote the Acts of Peter. Not so Schmidt. After examining all the testimony, he comes to the conclusion that to Lucius belongs the honor of having composed the first apostolic romance. Contrary to his own expectation, he paved the way for an entirely new Old Christian literary production, because his example was soon followed by the author of the Acts of Paul, who was also of Asia Minor. Standing on the shoulders of both, Pseudo-Peter wrote this romance. This will explain many things, especially the fact that Pseudo-Peter made use of the Acts of John and Paul, probably also of other sources. According to Schmidt, the Acts of Peter were composed between 200 and 210 A.D. at Jerusalem and Rome. Zahn pleads for Asia Minor, which would account for the author's ignorance of Roman affairs. The Acts of Peter are valuable for our knowledge of the ancient Catholic Church. They bring before us the Christian Church in its religious thinking, feeling, and working at the end of the 2nd century. Only a Catholic writer could present such a picture. We first give the Coptic fragment. We then give Peter's affairs with Simon at Rome, or the Actus Vercellenses, which begin with Paul's abode at Rome and his taking leave of the congregation there, chapters 1 through 3. The next section, chapters 4 through 32, treats of Simon the magician and the struggle which Peter had with him. Simon is overcome and the Roman congregation is reestablished at Rome. The last section, chapters 33 through 41, treats of Peter's death and its causes. With the exception of the martyrdom of Peter, which is extant in the Greek original, the greater part of the Actus Vercellenses is in Latin. This Latin text, which is found in manuscript 108:1 of the chapter library at Vercelli, follows after the Clementine recognitions. The manuscript belongs to the 7th century, but was probably copied from an earlier one, belonging perhaps to the 4th century. End of Introduction to the Acts of Peter.